Mrs. Sarah Guthrie, granddaughter of Woody Guthrie.
As I was walking that ribbon of highway, I saw above me that endless skyway. I saw below me that golden valley. This land was made for you and me. Let's sing it together. This land is your land. This land is my land. From California to the New York Island, from the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me. Oh, I've roamed and rambled, and I follow my footsteps through the sparkling sands of her diamond deserts, and all around me a voice was sounding. This land was made for you and me. All at once. This land is your land. This land is mine. To the New York Island, from the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me. There was a great high wall there.
From WBRN Radio and on the Boston Red Network, we have a special presentation. We do these numerous days that are set aside for public celebration, reflection, etc. And this particular day is no exception to the rule. This is Boston Red in the Jerry Pippin broadcast booth. Thanksgiving Day 2019. We've done many of these, and of course our late partner Jerry Pippin has two. They revolve around, the start of them was a celebration with the so-called settlers and the Aboriginal Native American peoples. They had assembled to pay homage to the harvest and the service of the people to the humanity. They were a collective celebration at that time. And then Thanksgiving over the years warped to a family presentation. We still have in some cities what they call now community dinners, but most of those dinners are focused towards disadvantaged people, and some are set off for ordinary people, senior citizens, etc. Meals on Wheels, you name it, they're all out there on a Thanksgiving Day. But when we look at Thanksgiving Day as a set-aside, a reflection day, and for the retailing establishment, the beginning of the holiday sales in earnest. The next day is a so-called Black Friday, Cyber Monday, etc., where people go to these used to go to these retail stores to buy various things for their families to get ready for the St. Nick's holiday. At least here in North America, there are various days in other countries that they set aside to do the identical same thing. But this so-called Thanksgiving Day is the largest travel day of the year. We heard from Baltimore, the Thurgood Marshall Airport. A gentleman there was talking about Tuesday would be a very big travel day. So that assumes that people are off in many places the entire week. Because Thursday being the holiday, and of course Friday, many people will not work. So that would be Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and back on Monday. So those big travel days starting on Tuesday, and also Wednesday, and of course return flights or return trips on Sundays. On Sunday, I should say. And in some locations, people are just traveling by automobile. So that could either be on that particular day the Thursday, and the families assemble, a family day, usually generations, grandfathers, if they're there, and fathers and mothers, children, etc. What we don't see is usually families that are interconnected. I recall years ago there was a family I would go by occasionally and visit them. They felt sorry for those of us that didn't have a family in that area, but nonetheless, and usually there's not, it's usually confined to one family and not necessarily even to friends that attend these dinners. But our broadcast revolves around what is happening in modern politics, and that is something at many tables is not discussed. At some it is discussed, but the nature is there. The backdrop we were talking about on the Numbers Man show, incidentally, is on WBRN Radio, our network. 7,300, I believe, it could be 7,600 retail stores have closed, various sizes, etc., have closed this year, 2019. A vast amount. We were looking at the Credit Suisse index of stores, and more stores will be closing at the end of this season. You hear about the massive ones, the Sears, the JCPenney, etc., closing a number of their stores, a number of other stores closing or reconfiguring their stores. The online retailers that are out there, the Amazons, the Walmarts, and of course Walmart still has some stores. They've closed a lot of their Sam's Clubs and some other things. And then you start looking at the retailing landscape out there, the Costco's and various others that make their money off of memberships. But they're increasingly having to compete with these online operators. And then you get into some of the stores that sell TVs, etc., the Best Buys, the Targets of the world. They are doing better. Toys R Us is out of business. It's supposed to come back, but again, the whole retailing situation has changed. The brick and mortar shopping malls, the shopping mall people are getting ready after the holiday season to see a lot of vacancies in 2020. So in other words, the whole configuration of shopping has changed. You can order stuff year-round. There are all kinds of promotions, particularly for Amazon's Prime, free shipping. Memberships are involved in some of those. And then you have some of the retailers have reward cards, etc. online. Question is, when you start for these various, where is the consumer confidence? Is it up? Is it down? And interesting, we had a survey come out from the University of Michigan. We have sort of a divide. The business community is more pessimistic about the future, and consumers at this time are optimistic about what is going on. So this blends into what is going on at the Thanksgiving table. The turkey, which costs more, costs the retail food store more than he did last year, and at the same time, depending on what area of the country you're in, the fresh turkey can run you, we'll say, about $3.50, $3.75 a pound. Get one of these whole food outfits now owned, of course, by Amazon. Or if you are in Houston or one of those outlets, it can be as cheap as 45 cents a pound. So that is the meal itself, the cost of the meal, and of course the various things that go with the meal. Those pricing is slightly up. But the political climate is what brings about the dinner itself. Yes, there are jobs out there. People are working in slightly greater numbers. But we have teachers in Missouri, teachers in Texas, working not only at teaching, but driving for Uber, Lyft, and whomever else they can deal with. Whether it be Pogo Stick Inc. In other words, we have the gig economy, cross-secting with so-called real economy. So we look at that backdrop on this day, a family day, and how does it affect families? Well, you have Dr. Lawrence Jung, he is the chief economist. House Association was talking about the impact of Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders' college forgiveness loan program. And there are various configurations to these programs that they would hope to put out there. But they have a silver lining in them. But if you free $50,000 worth of debt, which is basically owned by the federal government, that is money that families, young couples, etc., in the Thanksgiving tradition, could buy a house to have the Thanksgiving dinner in and invite the grandparents, the various other relatives there. This is one of the things. And then if you have Medicare for all, you free up more dollars in that you would not have the co-pays, those premiums, but you would have tax. Borders on a little bit of modern economics or just pure old deficit spending. You pay on the front side, it costs much more, but on the back side you get the benefits. Now, such things as college forgiveness, once that is forgiven, people would immediately be able to use whatever it be, $50,000 debt they have, that would be erased. And then they would be able to move forward with buying. That stimulates jobs, the whole stimulus program in the supply chain. Materials, laborers, etc., even the interest rates on the loans. So that in itself establishes an ecosystem. And we have to look at it as we looked at the first Thanksgiving dinners, the collective ones. And that would also be a collective situation where you would be dealing with it collectively, but it would benefit families and our communities. So you have to have more of a long-range situation involved. But we have to look at it, as we do here on Boston Red, the political situation here, presidential contest in 2020, and how the various candidates and their platforms running in the Democratic primaries would affect the next Thanksgiving dinner, literally. And the emergence now of, say, Bloomberg there. Elizabeth Warren was in Des Moines, Iowa Monday, talking about Bloomberg. He could $100 million in the presidential contest. It's much cheaper than being taxed 2% is over $50 billion. Absolutely true. But we've seen this play out many times. The Koch brothers were, and various other billionaires in 2016, particularly 2012, were donating millions of dollars to conservative causes to serve their own best interests. The difference we have now is you have a chief executive that's using the presidency to enhance his family, his friends, cronies, their particular vested interests. So that's a little different political landscape we saw at the last Thanksgiving dinner. We've also seen more strikes. Teachers have struck this year. From Kentucky, the teachers in Oklahoma have struck. Teachers in Chicago this year have struck. The automobile workers, UAW, struck one of the longest strikes they've had since the 70s. So workers are striking all over. You have these work stoppages going on because they perceive the economics today is as good as they will see. Because next year is, by many of the analysts, the International Monetary Fund, these central banks, will not be banner years, and they will not have banner years going out, which will affect the Thanksgiving dinner. So it's kind of like all politics being local. Well, the Thanksgiving dinner is now a national, and this is another thing that's happened. These political situations, we just finished covering the governor's race in Louisiana with John Bell Edwards, and the idea of nationalizing that race, putting his picture with Nancy Pelosi, the governor's race in Kentucky with Mr. Beshear, and those various machinations there, and those losses that occurred to the right-wing parties. Now, and you also see the situation that's happened to Uber in London. Their license has been revoked. They're in appeals now. In California, the law has passed there, and it will take effect in the next few months, I believe, or is it next year? Anyway, that will classify the Uber, the Lyft employees as just workers and not self-contractors. So in other words, this willy-nilly, laissez-faire gig economy itself is starting to see holes within it. So the turkey could be brought to you by Lyft or by Uber, and it depends, because they are cheaper. And this, in effect, is has a deflating effect on the economy. Things are cheaper. That's why the retailers are having these sales, at least on a few items, to try to get people into the stores. But people now are buying less clothing. I guess the clothing is lasting longer. And only so many 60 or 70 or 80-foot TV sets, and whatever they are these days. In the lines, even some of the retail stores, this is the ones that are the brick and mortar, are closed on Thanksgiving Day. They'll open that night or early on a Friday morning, or some will be, I suppose, opened on Wednesday, and then they can close to let the workers have their Thanksgiving Day off as a quote-unquote a family holiday. When we finish our part of the presentation here, we'll hear from 2010. There was a candidate running in Delaware. They literally called her working class Christine O'Donnell. She even at one time was quote-unquote a witch. Well, what has happened now, you have all kinds of characters like that, the flat earthers, people that are doing astrology and various other types of situations on YouTube, primarily Facebook, etc., are specializing in what's called alternative. As Bernie Sanders would say, you only have one fact, is the damn fact. You don't have two facts. You can't have two factual statements. You can only have one. So this is a kind of situation that went from working class Christine O'Donnell to the working class in rural communities being the backbone of DJ Trump's 2016 campaign. But the numbers were up there, and various other groups, so-called religious groups, saw their chance to make a Supreme Court for the next 20 or 30 years. And the reason behind that is changing demographics. They understand this. The Thanksgiving dinner will not be the same. And at the same time, when you change demographics, you change the way that you literally even buy the turkey. Now you can pick up the turkey, or the turkey can be delivered to your house, the ham or whatever you used to get. I remember OJ was in the ham business. I forget who the ham company was now, but they would ship you the ham. You can get the Omaha steaks, and if you can afford it, the prime rib. You can get anything that you wish delivered. So when you change that kind of situation over, many other things change. You now have the mobile or smartphone. More people have these handheld devices that have desktop computers. So you won't see a whole lot of desktop computers on sale this holiday season. Once you have the computer was what the Best Buys of the world relied upon, along with the TV. Not so much TV sets at that time. It was the computer and accessories, Dell and all these people. But now everybody's in the clouds. You can't even buy a lot of the software packets anymore single. You gotta have to buy a cloud subscription, whether it be for a day, few hours, or whatever. So that has already changed the way that people do basic things. We have convenience voting, or early voting, or using absentee ballots, etc. Mail-in ballots out in Oregon and several other states. We have various rank voting in some places, which is racist. But we have all kinds of things going on there. And with social media, yes, the turkey, you can get the turkey app that will tell you how to prepare the turkey, or you can dial in, or however you can do it. You have all this instantaneously. So when you empower people, and we'll call them empowered people, the smartphone, with working class Christine O'Donnell, you can have the smartphone. And at one time, the working class Christine O'Donnells and types didn't have the personal computer. But now they can have the smartphone with all the apps that they need. And these are just apps. They don't have to worry about the programs anymore. Just install the app and that's it. They can text, using even voicemail if they don't want to type the text. They can go to Facebook, to Twitter, wherever they want to go to. Various insignia, you name it. They can go there. Make comments, pitches. They can order all kinds of snake oil from various characters. They're all over YouTube. There, when old what was it, Jones out of Austin was up there. He made his money off of these ads. People selling all kinds of quackery during the holidays. Period. Even an herb to put on the turkey, I suppose. But all these out there, including campaigns against vaccinations. Now that could impact the family dinner. One person could bring measles there, and all the other little children there could catch the measles, or not have the flu vaccine and knock out grandpa and grandma. I mean, all of these things affect other kinds of things. But so how did they start out? Well, it started out in 210. You had something called the Tea Party Express. Don't hear anything about it. I guess the Tea Party Express is now stopped. Is no longer an express along with the stagecoach. So that is out, but you now have a more concentrated situation with the Fox News and Fox and Friends. People will be around there before they go to their table or after they go to their table watching that. And, of course, what sports plays in it. Remember when these African-American football players, led by Colin Kaepernick, kneel down against injustice. Period. Well, that was amplified on TV, and it went into sports. So, in other words, all these things are playing out. The Thanksgiving football games aren't what they used to be. Back in the day is when we had, the Chicago Bears, the Detroit Lions on those days. I forget who played on Christmas and who played on Thanksgiving Day. The college ball games, we'll still have those and out there. So all these things complement each other. You have politics in sports, very heavily in sports, because that determines who plays where. Period. That's how we got free agency. That's how we get diversity in these sports. Not as much diversity, obviously, in baseball as we once had, especially where it is with African Americans. But we have basketball and we have football. All these are national sports in the U.S. Soccer abroad. All of these things are available now on what is called the net, which you can get the net pewter piped to your TV set. You don't need to watch the networks unless you want to. There are all these so-called streaming services there. Netflix, Amazon, all of them are making movies. There are more movies than before. In fact, we had a debate. The last debate was at the Tyler Perry studio, the largest and only African-American owned studio in the U.S. So that shows that the Thanksgiving meal, at least the backdrop to it, was not the same as we had in 2010 when we had working class Christine O'Donnell talked about the same things. But back then she was talking about less government. Now, well, you don't hear that. Term limits, you don't hear that. That was in Delaware. Chris Coons, I believe, was the Democrat running there, and I forget who the Republican was. She had also, I believe, ran for they had one House seat there. That is where Joe Biden came from, and Joe Biden was a senator from Delaware for many, many years. So there is a connection there. Now, where Looney Tunes Christine O'Donnell is, I have no idea. She was originally from Jersey, I believe. Yeah, she was from Jersey. But she had all kinds of problems there. But there was a money push there, and some of the same people are out there now. They're hanging around on YouTube. YouTube's a big place for these people. They've taken some of these characters off of YouTube, but they use that as organizing and indoctrination base. And the conspiracy theories really got, incidentally, 2010 was a catastrophe. The Democrats lost the House in 2010. However, though, President Obama rocketed to re-election in 2012. And the rest, as they say, is history. But 2010, we were just coming out of the Depression 2008, 2010, and you still got the same message on that Thanksgiving Day. It's sort of like when the so-called Pilgrims met with the Aboriginal people. The Aboriginal people had a collective message for them on their harvest, and at the same time these so-called Pilgrims or settlers were plotting against them to exterminate them and get their land. And then came, as they say, the great push west. It was not how the West was won, it was how the West was stolen. And now we see Aboriginal people fighting back. In fact, the Attorney General was forced to go out to Montana and talk about the deaths of all these indigenous women that have been dying, and no answers have been found as to what happened. We had a situation in Baltimore, in the state of Maryland, where 3 defendants, after being in jail for over 35 years, were set free because they had the wrong person. And this goes back to the use of the criminal justice system for political purposes, crack down on crime, these extreme sentences. Today, we hear about sentencing reform. Even Bloomberg pushes that. But at the same time, we have immigration as an issue. That's the latest trope there, racist trope. The so-called border wall, build a border wall, that appeals to the element that supported working class Christine O'Donnell to bamboozle the working class. I was reading We're Still Here by Salviner, an interesting book about the European working class from which Christine O'Donnell came. This is Jennifer Salviner. A very, very interesting book, no doubt about that. I encourage you to read it. Anyway, nonetheless, this is how we see Thanksgiving 2019. Wish everyone a happy holidays there. When you do, for those that are having the dinners or whatever you're having, reflect on what is going on around you in terms of the collective. Given that politics now in the U.S. are nationalized, you have a global economy. So what happens in Hong Kong or happens in Beijing or Shenzhen or wherever affects you if you're in Detroit or if you're in Birmingham, Alabama, or in the coal fields of West Virginia, Ohio, etc. Everyone is interconnected in one way or the other, even if you do not believe in interconnectivity. If you're just on your little Facebook or wherever you are, you're still running ragged individualism, but you're answering to the rally call of the Tea Party, of the flat earthers, Trumpers, or whomever you're relating to. historians will look back on this time as not a very happy time in human development, particularly on things like climate change. Incidentally, a big storm is coming on Wednesday and Thursday in many areas of the U.S. So thus, drive carefully, as one would say, out there. This is Boston Red on the 25th, I believe it is, or is 26th? 26th of November, 2019. Good day.
Today.
Very interesting time ahead. Julia Gillard, thanks for joining us tonight.
Thanks.
At least tied, if not even a little ahead of Mike Castle. And yet the Alaska race with Murkowski and Joe Miller has made suddenly the GOP machine aware of the fact that maybe they shouldn't ignore you. First of all, tell everybody about what your campaign has been about and what these last couple of weeks have been like for you.
Thank you. Well, all summer we've been going up and down the state, actually even before the summer, getting to know the voters, letting them know that we're optimistic. We can begin the effort to turn the tide in our country. We can begin to have real recovery based on private sector jobs. Yet we need men and women in Washington, D.C. who know that we can't spend our way to recovery and tax our way to prosperity. We've been sending that message out there, and it's resonating with the folks that it's time to put party principles over party power. And what we've seen happen all across the country is that message, party principles over party power, is a winning message. And these last couple weeks, actually the last couple days, there's been a combination of a couple things happening. Number one, that message is resonating with the common sense men and women in Delaware, common sense men and women across the country who know that the direction that we have, the big spending direction, is not sustainable. And they see Barack Obama proposing these, and they see Mike Castle, a Republican congressman, supporting what Obama is doing, and they're getting frustrated with it, so they're rallying behind my campaign. That happened right... I'm sorry.
Well, no, clearly, as America has seen, that especially you've got Tea Party Express there helping you, which was a key element in Joe Miller's victory in Alaska, and I think there's a realization that, wait a minute, that maybe this is where the nation is going, which, to say the least, your race is key in being able to stop the lame ducks in there in the Senate, because you get seated immediately. We've got, of course, the primaries a week from today, and I think Americans finally now are focused in realizing that your race is very much like what was happening in Alaska.
That's right. All that stuff started happening at the same time. The Tea Party Express said they're coming to Delaware on the ground. The polling came out that has me neck and neck with Mike Castle. There's also polling that has me ahead in the general. And then Alaska, there was that nice, great win for Joe Miller in Alaska where people in Delaware got to see that it's not about who the incumbent is. It's not about how much money you have. It's not about if you have the establishment. It's about if you have the support of the people. So that message really started resonating, and things were coming to a head, and that's when Mike Castle got scared and started slinging mud.
Yeah, that is typical. We've seen it. Sarah Palin experiences it. We saw it against Nikki Haley. We're seeing it against you. Now, Mike Castle is a multimillionaire, as all of these people tend to become when they're 17, 20 years in Congress. You are not, and yet he's got these commercials running. The same arguments about you are used against Reagan, of course, is that you're naive, you're a neophyte, you don't know how to handle money. Obviously, Mike Castle knows how to handle money. He's spending all the rest of our money. What do you say about the smearing that's going on right now?
Well, for one, it's backfiring on him. The day he took out his first hit piece against me, our online donations went up $21,000, which he doesn't realize it.
Great.
He just paid for the radio ads and the mailing. We need to counter that. In the past 4 days, we've brought in $50,000. When all of August, we were only able to raise $30,000. So it's backfired. The voters are tired of this. Because not only that, one of the biggest things he's trying to use against me is an IRS tax lien, which the IRS admitted it was a so-called computer error.
Oh, boy.
They issued a release, and they said, oops, our mistake. They issued a release. They zeroed out the balance. Mike Castle knows all that. Mike Castle knows that this is big government at its worst. yet he is still this week running ads that I have this tax lien against me.
Oh, brother.
But, you know, we've put all the documentation up on our website proving that it really was a computer error, so it's backfiring. People see that he has to resort to false accusations, and it's a shame. It's a shame that the incumbent congressman has to reduce to that level.
You know, and yet that's why you're doing this. You ran against Joe Biden in 2008. You're doing this not because it's suddenly convenient and you realize that there's a Tea Party movement. You were doing this when it wasn't a convenient thing for conservatives to run against incumbents. Alan West did the same thing in Florida, and he lost, and he's now, of course, coming back as well and looks very good for Florida's 22nd. But this is why, Christine O'Donnell, you do what you do and why Tea Party Express exists. And I think that, like your candidacy, for those of you who are willing to stand up and take the heat and expose these people for what they are, we all owe you a debt of gratitude. And clearly, this is the last week. What do you need most from people to help make this come to fruition here for us in Delaware? What do you need? Donations and on the ground help?
We need all of the above, specifically donations so that we can raise the money to counter these attacks. We heard that Mike Castle dumped $200,000 into specifically attack ads against me. That's a lot of money. That goes a long way in Delaware. So we need to counter that. We need money to professionally produce these ads to counter so that they can see my face saying, look, guys, let's rise above this. Enough is enough with the mudslinging. We need help with online campaigning. Every time there's a hit piece or something, it's so exciting to see people come to our defense and say, hey, enough is enough. Stand on your record. So we need more people doing that. Put up Google alerts, and every time there's a tacky thing, you just hit it right back at them. Mike Castle, stand on your record. Make this campaign about jobs. How are we going to get private sector jobs back in Delaware? How are we going to get real economic recovery in America instead of this stupid mudslinging?
Well, and
then if anyone wants to come to Delaware, this last week, things are really getting exciting.
Yeah, I bet. And over at Human Events, they make a very good point here when it comes to the nature of what Mike Castle stands for. And they warn that if Mike Castle goes into the Senate, you just line him up with Snow and Collins and Graham and McCain. I mean, we're going to have more people voting with Barack Obama. He's for cap and trade. I mean, the guy's record clearly is as an Obama voter. Is that right?
Absolutely. He's voted with Obama over 60% of the time. This summer, he voted with Obama on all the major bills, from the financial so-called reform to another stimulus to actually co-authoring the Disclose Act, one of only 2 Republicans to vote for the Disclose Act, but he actually co-authored it. So we have no doubt that you would be getting someone who would continue to carry the Obama-Reid water into the U.S. Senate, and that's not going to get our country back on track. I'm hoping, especially enduring the hits from even the National Republican Senatorial Committee, I'm hoping that voters see that I have the political will to stand up and defend them, to be the voice of the people and push back against these backroom deals, push back against the establishment and say enough is enough.
No, wait, Christine. So we're speaking with Christine O'Donnell here. Of course, their primary for the GOP nomination for Delaware Senate is next Tuesday. The NRSC said that they were getting involved with the Murkowski race because she was an incumbent senator. Well, Mike Castle is a representative. He's a House member. Are they actually involved now in your race on his behalf?
Yep, absolutely. It was in the Wall Street Journal. The Wall Street Journal reported that the NRSC is the one pushing around these briefings. Again, this is according to the Wall Street Journal. I don't see why they would lie about it.
Yeah.
But that's what's so appalling is because if they were smart, they would see the writing on the wall and realize that we have the right message. These are winning principles. These are constitutional principles. They resonate with everyday Americans.
These are people who clearly have abandoned that. That's why you're such a threat. I mean, they're not. They just haven't lost their way. That is not their view of the party. I mean, this is the Republican Party becoming what the Democrat Party was like under John F. Kennedy. You've got the Democrats turning fascist. And so this is about needing, as Dick Armey noted, needing to have a hostile takeover, if you will. And I think that's how the Republican establishment sees you and Palin and Joe Miller. They know that you're independent. They know that you're going to be speaking for the people, not for the party apparatus. And that's why you're such a threat. Now, in November, beyond getting you past the primary, which is imperative, you say that you have a poll here that shows you ahead of the Democrats for that. Is that right? How does November look for you?
November looks great. Rasmussen did two polls in July, and keep in mind, Joe Biden, our vice president, was campaigning for Chris Coons, my Democratic opponent, in July. So right around the time when all the stops were being pulled out for Chris Coons, Rasmussen did two polls. One has me within 5 points. One actually has me 2 points ahead.
Wow.
So I have no doubt that before we had muscle, when we were struggling to raise $10,000 at a time, we were that close. We were within striking distance in the general election. I have no idea. I have no doubt that when we win this primary, we can take that 2-point lead and turn it into a 10-point lead.
No, absolutely. I mean, this is truly a velvet revolution, and your race is clearly that framework. Obviously, the establishment learned something with the Murkowski loss. Their answer is to turn to smears and to try to save the status quo, which you're right. The message has been we don't want it. And the good news is you've got Tea Party Express on the ground there. We're going to have them on the show on Thursday. They're helping with are they doing, like the grassroots on the ground mobilizing? What kind of help are you getting from them?
Yep, it's beautiful to see. The Tea Party Express had a press conference today, and I popped over, and wow, there was an energy and an excitement. I think those liberal reporters in Delaware didn't know it hit them. It was just so moving. They're going to be running ads. They're going to get phone banking going.
Good.
So it's great because what they bring to these insurgent challenger candidates who are sending a strong message to Washington is they bring almost a para-campaign that normally the Republican Party would. Assistance with phone banking, assistance with ads. We don't have that, so it's great to have the reinforcements.
Well, I'll tell you. I just wanted to say, obviously, from the state Delaware, that is the first state, there's got to be a message about what this revolution is that the founders would love. I mean, they have people like you and Sarah Palin and Alan West. That's who they had in mind when it came to the American sensibility and what the kind of person who should be going to Washington. And I know you don't have a lot of time. Thank goodness you're busy. But even with Tea Party Express on the ground, Mike Castle is a multimillionaire. They are going to pour all kinds of money into this race. You need a separate base of money to pay for the ability to counter the smear ads that are going on out there right now.
That's right. And if anyone can help, please go to Christine2010.com. It is very affordable in Delaware. I'll give you an example. $80 buys a 30-second spot on Sean Hannity's television show.
Excellent.
So that's very doable.
That is
very
wonderful.
doable.
Yeah. So when if you're going to give, there's a huge difference in the impact you can make for Christine. I've donated. I know a number of my Tammy Army members have donated. So think about if you think, well, $10 won't matter. If 8 people did that, there's a commercial on Sean's TV show on Fox. I mean, it is
exactly
a doable thing. Look, Americans have proven that they cannot be purchased. And we just want to make sure that you get the airtime so that your voice is heard. And as people are hearing you now, they're finding out that you're persuasive. You can win. You are the consummate Tea Party activist candidate. Tea Party Express knows that, and so do the rest of us. Christine, congratulations on such a great job so far, and we're going to do whatever we can to help carry you over the finish line.
Thank you, Tammy, and I also want to congratulate you because if it weren't for folks like you out there getting the message, mobilizing the people, encouraging them, and keeping them informed, candidates like me would not have hope for victory. So thank you for what you're doing as well.
Well, it is my pleasure, and we'll stay in touch with you. We'll talk to Tea Party Express on Thursday and go out there and punch some evil in the face for us, would you?
You got it.
Okay, excellent. Christine O'Donnell, the Tea Party.
Michael Castle is attacking working-class Christine O'Donnell, supporting the Obama agenda. $1 billion bailouts. Michael Castle, yes. O'Donnell will fight them. Keeping Obamacare and cuts in Medicare. Castle for it, O'Donnell against it. The cap-and-trade energy tax. Castle, yes. O'Donnell says no way. On real issues, issues that count, Castle is just plain wrong. Wrong on his votes. Wrong on his record. Wrong for Delaware.
I'm Christine O'Donnell, and I approve this message.
That was Christine O'Donnell.
An independent conservative candidate running for, of course, the GOP nomination next Tuesday against a rhino who is voting.
The Republican national establishment has put over $220,000 into Governor Joe Miller's campaign. Lisa McCoskey is thinking of having a write-in campaign, and there they don't allow the stickers for the candidate's name. That's McCoskey, M-U-R-K-O-W-S-K-I-A, again, M-U-R-K-O-W-S-K-I-A, as in the spelling of most Polish names. So it is. It would be correct if not. The Club for Growth, they're all getting into the action there behind Joe Miller. So in other words, what's happening here with the Tea Party types, they're getting money from the establishment, from the vested interests within the capitalist system. Make no mistake about that. Christine O'Donnell may be working class Christine O'Donnell, but she's representing Club for Growth, various multimillionaires. Castle may be a multimillionaire. He's representing the same people. So in other words, Eeny, Meeny, Miny, and Mo. Eeny, Meeny, Miny, and Mo. You have basically the same kinds of people. Scott McAdams, back to Alaska, has the endorsement of the AFL-CIO and Richard Trunker. So that race is really shaping up out in Alaska. You're going to see various forces coming in there. They're already there. The Tea Party Express is coming there. All these campaigns together in Delaware. Delaware is situated right outside of basically Philadelphia and runs to Maryland. That's where Christine O'Donnell's working class travelers live there. It's a very small state. Like Alaska has one representative, which basically means about 500,000 people per representative. Arkansas, on the other hand, is the state that Bill Clinton is from. He was the governor there. And also you have Mr. Halder there as lieutenant governor. So there are progressive people that have been elected in Arkansas. Governor Beebe's there. Branch Lincoln had low numbers before this happened, and she has remained low. But the electorate in Arkansas is a little bit different. So some hard campaigning needs to be done. In our opinion, she needs to catch up. She needs to make up about 7 or 8 points. But she is behind now, preferably 10 points. And then she can start the horse race going. That's in Arkansas. In the race in Australia, another very close race. You had the money interests there trying to defeat Labour. And money was pumped into the so-called Conservative Party. They call themselves the Liberals down in Australia. Make no mistake about it. The mining industry was in the wind. And the big controversy about climate control there, and it'll be done a little different thing. The pushing out of Prime Minister Rudd, he will be back also. So in other words, they are rearranging the decks. But all these races have basically some things in common. What happened in the UK, their hung parliament, the Americanization of their campaigns for the first time. So you now have a Tory government in with the so-called liberals who are basically conservatives also. It's caused a lot of pain in the UK. One does not know how long that gang of bandits will last. But as Bill Clinton said, it's a double-edged sword out there. The Republicans have put forth
basically the same program they ran on G.W. Bush. Extension of the job cuts, of the tax cuts for 2 years. Well, they could be done, and from an economic standpoint, it would create some jobs in short. This is all short term. However, long term, you run up to deficit. And then what happens is you have another recession and you lose, say, the 1 million jobs or so that you created. Don't hold me on that one because I actually looked at what this so-called Bush extension would. The Bush tax cuts are in force now. And what business is doing is many of these businesses are washed in cash. And those in manufacturing and other things are running 60-hour weeks. So in other words, they run 60-hour weeks, and if you take that 20 off of 2 workers, you could hire another worker for 40 hours. But they're not doing that. So in other words, there is some collusion going on here. Is the reason you have the economy that you have. As former President Clinton said, it's apathy and also amnesia. But this amnesia, though, is a deliberate thing. We talked about this before. Normally, in better times, you have these right-wing movements, and because they have more money to play with. We look at the homeschooling movement. That was done during the Clinton years, the militias, all that. They had extra money to buy guns, buy books. People were working so one could stay at home and teach their little kids right-wing thoughts. But now the situation is a little bit different. You have obviously some people that are desperate. You have other people that have been in this types of movements since George C. Wallace and the Nixon types. But the Republicans know the demographics are against them. Pennsylvania, for instance, Mr. Fluff talked about that. It has the highest concentration of senior citizens of any state in the U.S. Very diverse state around Philadelphia, those areas. Totally different area. But the candidate for governor is from western Pennsylvania. That's Pittsburgh in that area, Johnstown, etc. A little different situation there. There are some progressive holes within there. There is a history of it. It is a command and control state. So in other words, the Democratic Party gets to turn out. They will win a lot of these races in places that they will lose races. So many of these toss-up races now are not really as tossed up as you think when you add in the leaners. So look at several polls, not just one poll, and many times you'll see one poll in one direction, one poll in the other direction. What does that mean? You need to probably look at a third poll to validate the first poll. The robo-pollers are out there roboing, or auto-pollers, what you want to call them. But this snapshot's only good for that day. If you look at some of the presidential tracking polls, they have President Obama basically from 43, 42, up to 47, perhaps in some as far as 48. He hasn't broken the 50 mark in a long time. But at the same time, you have some of these candidates out there close to 50%. Now, in some of these races, you actually have 3 candidates in there. So you have 3 candidates in there depending on, say, for instance, the one candidate's pulling 10 or 15%. And the other 2 are in the 30s. So in other words, that's a very tight race. It's going to depend on many, many things, turnout, other things, a lot of undecided people out there. They're trying to wait and see which direction this is going. Does the economy improve? Does the Tea Party fall apart? And what's troubling to many people is, in many locations, they see these extreme views, and they know that electing these people to Congress, they're going to get virtually nothing. So what's going to happen is many of these people that get into the Congress will toe the party line. In other words, what Bonner has to offer in the House, if that were to be the case, that's what they would do, or in the Senate. They will vote pro-business, pro-Wall Street, less regulation. What they mean by less regulations is to let the businesses rip off consumers at will, literally. That's what they mean by that. Let the polluters pollute. Let the BPs of the world cause disaster in the economy, disaster to the beaches, disaster to the people. That is really what is at stake. They disguise this with liberty, but don't confuse liberty for license. And that is what is happening with Joe Miller. Joe Miller is completely confused. He's talking about a literal interpretation of the Constitution back to 1600s. In 1776, way of faking there. There was no Air Force because there was no airplanes. The Constitution has adjusted for 300 years. There were no computers back in those days. So there's many things. There was no automobile for the government to regulate. It does regulate automobiles. So if you go down the list of things that are now here, TVs, internet, etc., they didn't have that when they met in Philadelphia. So anyone with an ounce of sense would know literally the Constitution has changed with the times. That's why you have courts to interpret it. Miller knows better, and the rest of those crackpots know better. But what they are doing is they are literally working on the ignorance of the people to a certain extent. But people have to be receptive to a message, is what happened in Germany. The German people had to be receptive to Hitler and his program, because he was literally doing God's work, as he said in Uncouth, my story, over and over again. And they bought this, hook, line, and sinker, as LBJ would say. And they went with it and destroyed the whole country. Now, there are zealots like that out there. But remember, the monopoly capitalists, Crump and Company, and various others were in business, and they're still in business today. They're not went out of business. So the business of business rolls on. Tea Party or no Tea Party. Where does Tea Party get the money? The Koch brothers out of Kansas and various other multi-billionaires are giving them this money to run these deals. So when you see these various blogs that are paid for by these various human affairs, etc., over at right-wing Erickson imitators, they are funded by big business. They represent the interests of big business, but they disguise it as some sort of backdoor, milly-nilly populism sprinkled with a bunch of racism. Because they have this thing where these populists, but the thing that gets the engine cranking are things like immigration. But that's a disguise for the KKK type activity. So they bring that along. And then you have Glenn Beck coming along with his religious stuff. Now they have this crackpot in Alabama wanting to burn Qurans. Well, the situation is Beck said, well, no, we can't do that. Well, why? They don't want to upset the Saudis. They dump those dollars, and this economy will go flushy, flushy, flushy. This is Boston Red. Be careful. We'll talk to you soon. Their primaries next week, if my voice holds up. And there will obviously be more polling. It moves along. And remember, if there is a write-in campaign in Alaska, you will have to spell Murkowski, Murkowskia. Well, even I can spell it. Good morning.